Hi, my name is Kelsey Lawrence and I'm doing my final theory presentation on communication accommodation theory. Let's start off, let's use our imagination and think back to a time we moved around or we traveled to a place and the person we're speaking with has a different type of accent or uses their pauses a little bit different, either slower or there isn't very many pauses. Us in turn usually will accommodate to that and start having the same accent as the other person, or our speech, the pauses in our speech, will be that reflective of those people. Now, looking at it from a different perspective, think back to your teenage years when you learned and the only thing you would speak in was slang language. Well, when you came home and started talking to your parents in slang, they completely just were uncomfortable, did not like it at all. That is the second form of how you can start accommodating communication. That's more of a negative way. So what exactly is communication accommodation theory? Howard Giles defines it as a theory of intercultural communication that actually attends to communication. And communication accommodation theory is CAT for short. And that is from Griffin, Ledbetter, and Sparks, 2015, page 392. So why is this theory important anyway? Well, the theory helps with social approval. When we create those similarities, it creates likability between two people. It can create attractiveness. You are able to gain power depending on what strategy you use of communicating. You can have distinctiveness, and it can highlight your group identity, or you can use it to show disapproval. Throughout this presentation, we will talk about the history of CAT, two accommodating strategies, positive relationships with other theories, CAT applied in research, the strengths and weaknesses of the theory, and 3 different ways we can improve real life using CAT. This is Howard Giles. He started CAT in 1973. Back then, it was speech accommodation theory. This was defined as two people from different ethnic groups start to accommodate another's communication in order to seek approval. This was very narrow on the issues and was only focusing on speech rate, accent, and pauses. The theory was developed a little bit more, there's more research done into it, and in 1987, Giles changed it to communication accommodation theory. This has more still to do with intercultural, but it adds the new twist of intergenerational as well, and it really broadens what can go under CAT. The 2 different types of communication accommodation strategies are convergence and divergence. Convergence is seen as a more positive way of communicating, and you're trying to become more similar to someone else. Divergence, on the other hand, is seen as more of a negative way of communicating, and you're changing your dialect to make the other person more uncomfortable. This right here is an example of convergence. The 2 people are speaking back and forth in emojis, so that way they're using the same type of communication and language, and that's an example of convergence. Here I have a little short clip from the movie Airplanes in 1980, and I'll go ahead and explain it after I show it to you.
Can I get you something?
Some more folk butter laying into the bone, jack me up. Thank me.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Cuddy say can't hang.
Oh, stewardess, I speak jive.
Oh, good.
He said that he's in great pain and wants to know if you can help him.
All right. Would you tell him to just relax and I'll be back as soon as I can with some medicine?
Just hang loose, blood. You're gonna catch up on the rebound out of minutes.
What it is, Big Mama? My mama didn't raise no dummies. I duck a rap.
Cut me some slack, Jeff.
He said,
So in this short clip, it shows that the stewardess is not able to understand the two men and the way they are speaking. So then this lady is able to understand what they are saying and kind of translate it to the other people, so that way they're being able to effectively accommodate one another and be able to communicate. There's two different forms of divergence. There is maintenance and over-accommodating. Maintenance is more of a persistent and unaccommodating manner of communicating. A great example of that is in Billy Madison. He is trying to learn Spanish, and his tutor repeatedly is saying the things way too fast where he can't understand or even try and learn what he's saying. So he asks him nicely to repeat it slower, and yet again the tutor says it in the same pace, same way, and that way he's being persistent and unaccommodating. Second, are over-accommodating. It can be seen as demeaning and patronizing. So a great example of that would be Rush Hour. Detective James Carter and Lee. Lee is an Asian man. So when Detective James Carter tries to communicate with him, he is really being loud and slow with his words in hopes that he'll understand. But really, Lee speaks English, and so it just comes off as demeaning and patronizing. Deciphering intergroup versus interpersonal communication. There's 5 factors that increase the odds that communicators sees conversations in a group. And this will help us decipher how the conversation will go. First, collectivistic cultural context. So in the Asian culture, we know that their culture respects their elders. The elders are at the very top of the list and very highly respected. 2, distressing of interaction. In this, we group people by social identity based on our past experiences that we have had. 3, stereotypes. This, we're basing our future interactions based on the stereotypes that we have in our head about different groups of people or about people in general. 4, the norms for treatment of groups. So let's go back to the elderly I was speaking about earlier. We are adjusting the way we communicate in a more respectful manner, as opposed to if we were talking to one of our friends and was not using correct grammar and just correct language in general. Lastly, high group solidarity, high group dependency. So this comes into play in the us against them rhetoric. So let's look back at a community that you have set in stone, or a group that you're a part of, and you guys all care about each other, your well-being, and help one another in everyday life. Well, let's say someone comes in and tries to change those things. That is going to be the us against them rhetoric and high group solidarity. And that is from Griffin, Ledbetter, and Sparks, 2015. There are some positive relationships through CAP that we have with other theories. Uncertainty reduction theory is one of those, and by being able to accommodate to different types of communication, we create similarities, and similarities will reduce our uncertainty of a person or an experience or a conversation. Next, social identity theory. We're accommodating in a divergent way because we're representatives of our social identity. We are speaking and using our communication skills of those that we are identifying with socially. Lastly, attribution theory. So when we use the accommodation of convergence, we are trying to relate to someone else. On the other hand, when we're communicating divergently, we're showing the other person that the conversation is going to be more closed off and just they don't want to hear it. Now we're going to apply CAT to a couple of different researches done. First, research in healthcare. Watson and Gallos did a study on communication between healthcare providers and patients. The study addressed two things. Patients need to be more involved, and health professionals and patient encounters need to be governed by interpersonal and intergroup interactions. The goals of this study were to focus the attention on other person's emotional and communication needs, along with communication competence and the relationship between participants. The results of this study show that interpersonal rated higher based on attending to relationship and emotional needs. On the other hand, from a theoretical perspective, patients were there to be helped and really guided by the higher power, which was the healthcare provider. And that is Watson and Gallos, 1998. Next research was done in law enforcement. This was done by Myers, Giles, Reed, and Nabi. They studied the effects of officer accommodation versus unaccommodation. The study was there to address the link between accommodation and perceptions of competence and social attractiveness. The goals of the study were providing guiding principles of CAT while opening doors for further research to be done. The results showed no evidence of violation, severity, moderations, officer accommodation, and violation severity was impacted by cognitive and affective outcomes. Accommodation positively impacts perceived competence and perceived social attractiveness. This was Myers, Giles, Reed, and Nabi, 2008. Next research was done in personal and social attraction. This was done by Lee and Giles, and it was on personal and social attraction is associated with different types of behaviors. Interpersonal and intergroup are simultaneously instead of separate. And interpersonal is more towards personal attraction, where intergroup is more towards social attraction. Personal attraction increases, and then it will, in associated, increase in proximity, interpredictability, discourse management, and interpersonal control. On the other hand, though, social attractiveness, as it increases, it will decrease in proximity, interpredictability, course management, and interpersonal control. And that is Giles and Lee, 2008. Another study done by David Bueller and Kelly On is the effects of speech rate similarity on compliance. This research had tested out 3 different hypotheses. These hypotheses were good decoders prefer faster speech good decoders prefer faster speech rates than poor decoders. 2, as the speaker's speech rate becomes similar to the listener's speech rate, interpretations of intimacy and immediacy increases. The third hypothesis was interpretations of the intimacy and immediacy communicated by the speaker increase, compliance with a request for help increase. The results of this study found that the first hypothesis was incomplete due to extremely low reliability of the audio. The second hypothesis is true, determining that there was a strong correlation between sociability and character dimension of the credibility scale. Third hypothesis, there was no actual similarity in speakers' rate to listeners' rate. And this was Buehler and on 1992. Here's a fun little meme about talking slower to help. Now let's see some different ways that we can critique CAT. First, we're going to use the 6 criteria for good social science theories. First, explanation of data. This theory explains and tells us why the communication or conversation will happen. Prediction of the future. The expansion of the theory helped predict and alter theory to fit particular situations. 3, relative simplicity. This is actually one of the weaknesses of the theory because it is very complex. There is different accommodation styles and definitions from person to person, which makes it harder to kind of get a more simple response or definition. 4, testable hypothesis. This is a weakness because it is so complex that you really have to just take a chunk of the theory and research it that way or test it that way. You are not able to test the hypothesis as a whole. Quantitative research. Qualitative and quantitative research can be done on this theory. And each researcher interprets CAT specifically towards the context that they are researching it on. The practical utility. This is also another strength because it can be applied in a different array of contexts as we had shown previously in the research. And this is Griffin, Ledbetter, and Sparks, 2014. Another way we assess CAT is from Solis and Giles. They had 3 questions to further assess it. 3 questions were, in what context have CAT been researched, based research been applied? Second, what is the overall effect size of accommodation behaviors? Third, what are the correlators and associated effect sizes of accommodation behaviors in CAT-based quantitative research? And then for the findings of these, research focused on cultural, ethnic, and ethno-linguistic factors. It also had inter- and intragenerational. It was applied to family and legal contexts as well. To answer the second question, since broadening the theory, it is also able to examine macro and micro aspects of communication. The theory can be seen from multiple realms, including logical, empirical, and interpretive theoretical framework. Overall, effect size is about moderate to large in size because the context is so high that they're able to look at all the different accommodative behaviors. And the focus of this theory is not only on accommodation, but it is also on relational, cognitive, and communicative outcomes. And that is Solis and Grimes, 2014. So now that we have learned what CAT is and more about the theory and how it's been applied in our research, we're going to look at how we can, 3 different things we can improve in real life using CAT. First, starting out, law enforcement. We are able to improve our real life by understanding and predicting how communication could occur. So in society today, this is a major issue with police officers stopping and then other people, citizens, with police officers. There's a stigma around that people are scared of law enforcement, and I'm sure law enforcement is also scared of the citizens right now. And that and when we apply cat to that, we're able to predict what is going to happen, and in that way, we're going to start to accommodate to different people's way of communicating. So that way we don't just have one style, we have multiple that we can relate to other people and create similarities between the two. Healthcare is another major area that we can use CAT for. So in this day and age, as patients, we really want to be involved in our healthcare. That means when we go home, we need to know, the different exercises or what medication and when we should take it are, and we just really want that bond and more information about that to be more involved, which in the long run can actually save us time and money, because if we're caring for ourselves, then we don't have to go back to the doctor and we don't have these recurrent issues. Education is another major place we can use CAT to improve. Teachers nowadays, it's hard and with a room full of 30 students to accommodate to everyone's need. But with this theory, we can apply it, and being able to accommodate to those certain students will produce higher test rates, and it will really help everybody learn in a unique way in which they will be able to understand it. And they will also have a newfound love for it, because they're actually not struggling with it. They're actually being accommodated to in a way they understand what's going on and can actually start doing the problems that they were struggling with by themselves now. This is a great quote. My life is constantly under construction. There's always something to improve, and we can always improve using CAT. So in this presentation, we went over the history of CAT, 2 accommodating strategies, positive relationships that CAT have with the other theories and how they are included in CAT, CAT applied in different research scenarios, the strengths and weaknesses of the theory, as well as how to improve real life using CAT. It's already over. That's my favorite meme of the presentation. And here are the references.